One of the most incredible achievements of Avatar the Last Airbender is how it managed to tap into timeless truths about human nature, seemingly without even trying. If you ask the fans of the show what it's about, they would immediately give you a laundry list of topics and themes. Heroism, sacrifice, duty, hope, redemption, becoming the man or woman you're called to be, the triumph of good over evil. The importance of fatherhood, however, would likely not be what comes to mind, and yet ATLA is one of the best and most well-rounded explorations of this theme in the past 20 years. Every major character, often to a significant extent, is who they are because of the influence of their father or father figure. This is also undoubtedly true for every human being to ever exist. Our parents matter, and since Dad is half of that team, his qualities will have a significant impact on our own development. That is, if he is around at all. I'm sure it's not news to you that our world, especially the West, is suffering from a lack of involved and present fathers. Somewhere around 1 in 4 children in the US are from fatherless homes, and such a situation is strongly correlated with a whole host of negative outcomes, from juvenile drug use and academic failure to homelessness and criminal activity. Now, ATLA doesn't exactly delve into the topic of absent fathers in the strict sense, but it absolutely does show the harm that is caused by a father who, though he may be physically present, is not genuinely interested in caring for his children, and certainly not in a way that puts the child's best interests first. Such a lack of care is naturally what is caused and is causing our current societal epidemic, even if the bad dads of Avatar are a part of their children's lives, where many today just aren't. That's not to say that a father simply being around is enough. It's not, and a bad father may in fact be worse than no father, but I don't have any hard evidence to support or deny that claim. Regardless, at the center of this issue is a simple moral choice. Who do you love? Whose needs do you put first? Do you, the father, serve your children, or do you expect them to serve you? The answer to these questions will vary depending on the father figure we examine, and said variation is what gives Avatar's vision of fatherhood its richness and depth. Again, the show isn't about dads and their kids, but this theme is still very much present and relevant. Great stories have an ability to reach truths outside their main focus. So let's take a look at 5 fathers, whether biological or adoptive, and how they fit into the incredible tapestry that is Avatar the Last Airbender. As a pretty normal, ordinary, average human, I think it's only appropriate that I start out with the dad most like myself. Hakoda of the Southern Water Tribe is not wealthy, not a bender, not a lord, not a man of any special power or authority. Okay, I guess he is the chief, but that's a far cry from being the patriarch of their sister tribe at the North Pole. That being said, Hakoda is the type of father I aspire to be for one simple reason. He embodies sacrificial love. The first thing we learn about him is that he left home to join the war against the Fire Nation, willingly risking his life so that his children might have a chance at a peaceful future. So in one sense, he is an absent father, but there's an obvious difference between a man who goes off to war to protect his home and his people, and the man who goes off to buy milk and cigarettes and never returns because he was actually going to the casino. All the same, Katara resents Hakoda for abandoning them, for leaving Sokka as the man of the village and asking her to take on far more responsibility than befits a 14-year-old. And I love Hakoda's response when Katara expresses her anger in the first chapter of Book 3. He doesn't get defensive, doesn't try to reason with Katara and explain himself. He just holds her, because he knows that she knows that he had to go. Because while her outburst is not wholly justified, her feelings are natural and normal, because he can finally give her what she wants, the calming, reassuring presence of her father. After many years spent apart, he can finally be her rock again. This is what fathers are called to be. A rock, a foundation upon which their children can build their own lives. And it's clear, even from what little we see of him, that Hakoda is just that for Sokka and Katara. As I said a moment ago, both of them were called upon to do far more for their tribe than would normally be asked of children of their age. Hakoda in particular asked that of them, and he believed they could rise to the occasion. One of the scenes that best depicts Hakoda's strengths as a father is, ironically, one in which he is not present. Sokka's rite of passage, where he dodges rocks instead of the traditional ice flows. Although it is Bato rather than Hakoda who presides over this ritual, the obvious implication is that Sokka has learned all he knows about sailing and leadership from his father, and so Hakoda's lack of physical presence is dwarfed by the skills and virtues he has instilled within Sokka, which is why it made me so mad when Netflix bastardized this scene. In their adaptation, they made it a flashback, put it in the South Pole, and had Sokka fail his test, but Hakoda says he passed anyway, even though he knows Sokka will never live up to expectations. This is why Avatar is so necessary nowadays, because apparently nobody who writes for a living could even imagine someone having a healthy relationship with his father. This stupid scene assassinates Hakoda's character and makes Sokka look like an utter loser, just so what? He can prove Dad wrong later on? He doesn't need that. He needs to prove him right. Sokka wants to be the man his father is, to be the warrior and leader Hakoda believes he can be. That is how father-son relationships should be. The father should expect much of the son, and thus it is his duty to show him the way, to instill in him the strength, courage, and wisdom to meet those expectations. Coddling him, pretending he's got what it takes when he does not, at least not yet, is pathetic, wimpy behavior that absolutely disgraces the original character. I mean, if you don't have the courage to tell your son the truth about his own skill, how are you going to trust him to, say, lead the invasion of the Fire Nation? The opening of the Day of Black Sun is another perfect example of Hakoda being the foundation on which his children's character is built. He states his confidence in Sokka's ability to convey the plan to the gathered troops, and then steps in when Sokka gets stage fright and begins telling everyone his entire history with Aang instead of just, going over the plan. But afterward, he doesn't chide or blame Sokka for his nervousness, he simply carries on with the invasion. The next interaction we see between the two is Hakoda complimenting Sokka on his ingenuity as they ride inside a submarine toward the beach, which is exactly what Sokka needs in that moment to grant him the confidence to take charge of the invasion force after his father is wounded in the battle. This is the role of a father. Call your children to greatness, be the foundation upon which they can build toward it, support them when they fail, and encourage them to do better next time, to reach for ever greater heights, and ultimately, to give your life for them, if need be, which is what Hakoda chooses to do at the end of the failed invasion. He and the other adults stay behind so that the kids can escape to fight another day. Not only is this an instance of perfect sacrificial love, it also demonstrates the immense confidence Hakoda has in Sokka and Katara resolving the struggle which began the episode. And of course, Sokka repays him in full in Boiling Rock as the two Water Tribe geniuses concoct and execute an escape plan from the volcanic prison. All in all, Hakoda is the ideal version of a normal father. He faces many difficulties, challenges, and trials, but responds with confidence and courage, leading from the front and by example, never failing to encourage or support those who rely on him, his children most especially. In this, he serves as something of a foil to Lao Beifong, the other normal father in Avatar, at least as far as bending goes. I don't think Toph's dad is an earthbender. Anyway, if he is, he certainly doesn't flaunt it. And admittedly, unlike Hakoda, Lao is quite rich and powerful, but only 4 tickets to Ba Sing Se powerful, not let me into the Earth King's party powerful. Then there's also the fact that he was able to hide his daughter's existence from the entire world, which would hardly be possible for a man of lesser means. I genuinely wonder what the guy's plan was once Toph got older. It's not like she could hide away forever, and the Beifongs don't have any other children, so was she just going to pop into existence as the heir apparent at some point, or was he planning to appoint a guardian or several guardians who would take over for him and keep Toph hidden from the world until, she died? Yeah, Lao's long-term planning skills leave a lot to be desired, which makes sense as the way he parents Toph is decidedly short-sighted. He keeps her confined, he thinks, to the Beifong estate, granting her no independence and not letting her, again, he thinks, develop earthbending skills beyond their most basic form. And the thing is, it's not at all hard to see how he got there. One of the most foundational forms that a father's love will take is that of protective love. As we just talked about, dads are called upon to defend their families, even at the cost of their own lives. If your child is blind, you are going to feel that call in an unusually intense way. In most cases of parents failing their children, they did not start from a place of malice, but had perfectly sane and reasonable intentions. Certainly, this seems to be the case for Lao Beifong, who only wanted to keep Toph safe. However, his motivation seems impure, as evidenced by Toph herself being kept secret from the rest of the world, lest knowledge of their blind child somehow brings shame to the Beifong family. Oh, I'm sure Lao could justify this secrecy any number of ways, such as saying that given her blindness, Toph would be an easy target for kidnappers looking to score a ransom, which does happen. But yes, the man obviously takes his protective instincts to the extreme. And when confronted with undeniable proof that Toph is not the helpless little girl he thought her to be, he doubles down on his overbearing parenting style. Now, can a guy be blamed if he's not immediately willing to let his 12-year-old daughter fly off into parts unknown, intent on taking down the most powerful man in the world? Probably not, even in a fantastical setting such as this where the world savior is also 12, but I think it's fair to say that Lao could have reacted with a slightly looser iron fist. Really, if it weren't for Toph being hidden away for the sake of his pride, I think Lao would be viewed in a more forgiving light. But 12 years of secrecy and coddling have led him to refuse to believe that his daughter has any agency whatsoever, to the point that he tells the bolder and master Yu that the Avatar kidnapped her, rather than admit that she ran away, that she would dare buck his authority. As a father, I have to remind myself that I should want my kids to be safe and well-fed, to be obedient and virtuous, but for their sake, not for mine. Their success and well-being are not just markers of how well I parented. I mean, duh, that's obvious, but this is a challenge that all parents face. It's not exactly easy to give of yourself fully for the sake of another person, such as our calling. We must learn how to protect them and how to prepare them to face the wider world. But another way, we must seek balance, which brings me neatly along to our third father, in this case our first father figure, Monk Gyatso. We only see slightly more of Gyatso than we do Lao Beifong, but he has a far greater influence on the story. I mean, of course he does, seeing as he was the main character's guardian during his formative years, but I deeply appreciate how efficient and effective Avatar was when it came to portraying his personality and philosophy. Where Lao Beifong was motivated in large part by his desire to maintain his own reputation, Monk Gyatso's care for Aang is entirely selfless, his every action ordered toward the young airbender's genuine well-being. He is not just training the Avatar, not honing a weapon to be wielded in the coming fight, he is raising a child, teaching a boy how to be a good man. In short, he demonstrates personalistic love, love that truly seeks the good of the other without restraint or limitation. It is, somewhat ironically, this total commitment to Aang's health and happiness that allows Gyatso to be balanced. Where the other monks might demand Aang train constantly, Gyatso insists that he needs time to relax and play. He is still a child, after all. This is not neglect, not a shirking of duties. Gyatso states in one scene that Aang has trained enough for today. We're not privy to those training sessions, but considering Gyatso's prowess as an airbender, not to mention Aang's, they were clearly quite effective. Duty is important, as Gyatso admits, but so too are the things for which duty exists. Aang's destiny as the Avatar is, in part, to ensure the people of the world are able to spend time in relaxation and leisure. If he does not himself enjoy those comforts when they are available, how will he be willing to fight so that others might have them? If he is not loved in a personalistic manner, how can he treat others likewise? If Monk Tashi had his way, and yes, I had to look up that name, I'm not that much of a fanatic, Aang would undoubtedly be a worse Avatar. High-level airbending techniques matter far less in the end than does the ability to understand and connect with the people of the world wherever the Avatar may find himself. Not that they don't matter, but all things must be balanced. Now, does Monk Gyatso's influence toward the fun end up being a bit too strong in Aang? Probably, but mostly because their relationship gets cut short before it can fully develop, leading to Aang running away, getting caught in a storm, getting frozen in an iceberg. You know the drill. I wouldn't count that so much as a failure of Gyatso's judgment as it would his timing. And hey, Aang's character arc needed to start somewhere. Even so, Aang being more inclined to enjoy life is hardly all bad. The playful nature that Gyatso encouraged and nourished in him allows him to bring joy back into the lives of those who have had precious little of it these days. In the very first episode, he goes penguin sledding with Katara, who exclaims that she hasn't done this since she was a kid. To which Aang responds, "You still are a kid." One's duty cannot be ignored, but one can never let that duty consume him, let it become his identity. This is what Monk Gyatso knew, what he tried to pass on to Aang, quite successfully it turns out. A father must not look only at his children's potential and what they could be, but must also love them for their own sake, must let them be kids. Childhood is a gift that passes by far too quickly. It would be a terrible sin for a father not to allow his children to revel in its innate wonder and beauty while they still can, which happens to be Fire Lord Ozai's exact crime. I mean, it's hardly the only one, but with respect to his children, it's obvious that Ozai never once viewed them as beings with their own inherent value. They are, at best, his legacy. Their talents and abilities are reflections of his own skill. Zuko and Azula's worth as children, as people, is, in their father's mind, entirely tied to how effective they are. This is most clearly seen in the flashbacks in Zuko Alone, when Azula and Zuko show off their firebending prowess, or lack thereof, for their grandfather, Fire Lord Azulon. Ozai is exceedingly proud of Azula's performance, calling her a prodigy like her grandfather and namesake before her. But when Zuko steps up, unbidden, to demonstrate his techniques, Ozai frowns. He knows what will come next, and he's not happy about it. Why not? Because it reflects poorly on him. If his son, his firstborn, is a pitiful failure, that must be at least in part because Ozai failed to see to his training properly. It's no wonder that later events transpire as they do. For years before that fateful day, Ozai had already labeled his son worthless and useless. Could Zuko change his father's mind? Sure, if he were to equal or surpass his sister in terms of skill, but until that unlikely ever to occur day, the young prince would always be considered lesser. This sort of treatment cannot accurately be called love at all, but in the spirit of consistency, I would deem it conditional love. Do well, and father will like you. Again, not real love, that's just affection, and Ozai has precious little even of that. The best you can really hope for out of him is doing enough to not get on his bad side and ignite his wrath, which Zuko of course does do by speaking out against the treacherous battle plan leading to their Agni Kai, and Ozai teaching Zuko a permanent lesson on his face before sending him on a wild goose monkey chase. And honestly, what can I possibly say that would further enrich the picture of this man's villainy? Ozai is written as a man of pure evil with no redeeming qualities. He is, as Zuko puts it, the worst father in the history of fathers, which is in large part why he works so well as a villain despite lacking complexity. Oh sure, you could delve into his history and family background to discover why he is the way that he is. It certainly didn't help having Azulon as his father, for one, but for the purposes of this present story, Ozai would not be nearly as interesting a character if it were not for his children, if we were not able to see how the differences between Azula and Zuko highlight the various failings of the Father Lord. Zuko, as we have seen, brings out Ozai's impatience and rashness, traits that also describe Book 1 Zuko to a T. Azula, meanwhile, imitates her father in a more pleasing manner, to him at least, in particular when she suggests burning the Earth Kingdom's hope and lands to the ground. Not to be outdone in ruthlessness, Ozai takes her words quite literally and concocts his fire everywhere plan. But ultimately, the Fire Lord's chief vice is, unsurprisingly, pride. It was the wounding of his pride that provoked him to impetuously demand Zuko duel him. It was, assumedly, his pride that urged him to pit his children against one another, believing that doing so would ensure at least one of them would succeed as he required. And it most certainly was his pride that crowned him Phoenix King, that left Azula behind to watch over the Fire Nation capital while he claimed for himself all the glory as Sozin's comet arrived, bringing victory in its wake. Or tail, I suppose. What I find morbidly fascinating about this particular vice is how it can take so many different forms yet always has the same goal. Pride turns a man's attention inward, urging him to focus on his own wants, desires, and goals, often at the cost of others' needs. In this case, and in the case of Lao Beifong, at the cost of the love that a father should have for his children. The Earth Kingdom aristocrat and the ruler of the Fire Nation are both dominated by pride. Both let their pride prevent them from being the fathers they ought to be, but in completely opposite fashions. Ozai demands perfection from his children regardless of circumstance and without any help from him. He is not there to protect, to tutor, to coddle. Everything they learn, they will learn through experience, that brutal and merciless teacher. They will live up to his expectations, or they will vanish from his sight, lest they mar his image and thus his pride in even the smallest of ways. Lao similarly protected his reputation, but by insisting on secrecy and solitude, as we've already discussed. Point being, There are many ways to be a poor father, but in the end, whatever the manifestation, it is all due to pride, due to a man choosing himself over his children. To love is to give of oneself, to seek the good of the other. These men fail to do so, time after time after time. But then, we have Iroh. Now, I've already made 2 whole videos about this one character, so I apologize if I repeat myself somewhat, but I can hardly make a video about fatherhood and Avatar the Last Airbender and not gush about how incredible of a father figure Iroh is to Zuko. My oldest kid turned 7 fairly recently, and that is the age that my wife and I decided we would let our kids watch Avatar. Not because it's not appropriate for younger kids, my 3-year-old could definitely handle it, no problem, but because we wanted to save it until they were able to appreciate it more. If we hold it off for a bit, it becomes this rite of passage, as it were. And more importantly, we watch it with my oldest after the rest of the kids are in bed. And then once the episode is done, he immediately runs off to their bedroom to tell his siblings all about the episode. So by the time they turn 7, they'll already know the story frontwards and backwards, but that's not the point. We're a little over halfway through book 2 right now, and Zuko and Iroh are having a rough go of it. Things are looking up a bit since they got to Ba Sing Se, and Iroh made a name for himself brewing tea, but during the stretch of episodes leading up till now, Zuko has complained repeatedly about their living situation. I mean, of course he does. He is a 16-year-old prince suddenly thrust into poverty, having to scrounge and beg to survive where he had only ever known luxury. Even in banishment, he was still royalty. And every time Zuko complains, his uncle gently checks him. There is a simple honor in poverty, he says. Life happens wherever you are, whether you make it or not. I appreciate that Iroh doesn't argue with his hot-headed nephew, doesn't try to force Zuko to see things his way. Instead, he shows him his way. He goes through life with a smile on his face and a kind word for those whom he meets, regardless of circumstance. There's a lot of pressure on fathers to teach their children to behave properly, as there ought to be. That's a big part of our job. But most of that teaching will not come through verbal instruction. Our children do not, by and large, become who we tell them to be. They become who we show them we are. Obviously, there are exceptions. Zuko's story is a reflection of many real-world stories where a child has managed to break the generational cycle of vice, violence, trauma, and sin, but the truth of the matter is that children are most likely to model their behavior off of their parents. Sons will tend to become like their fathers. I mean, consider Iroh's history. By all accounts, he followed in his own father's footsteps for quite some time, continuing the war, winning numerous victories, even breaking through the outer wall of Ba Sing Se. It took an unimaginable loss, an upending of the natural order of things to tear him away from that path. Were it not for Lu Ten's death, I don't imagine Iroh would have turned out much less despicable than his younger brother. Then there is definitely no chance he adopts Zuko as his own if his own son were still alive. But he does, perhaps at the time because he felt he needed to right a wrong, because he wanted to know that he could be a good father. It is certainly possible that Iroh's motivations were not entirely pure and selfless when he first began to look after Zuko. But by the time we meet them, and certainly by the end of our story, Iroh has become one of the purest examples of unconditional love to be found in fiction. Love in its truest form is constant, unwavering, undaunted by passing circumstances. It cannot be destroyed or even diminished by a loved one's mistakes, failures, and sins. That does not mean a truly good father cannot reprimand or discipline his children. He must do so if he is to love them as he ought. Iroh challenges and chastises Zuko on several occasions, from the cave where they hide in Avatar Day, where he urges him to find the strength to hope, to the hideout beneath Lake Laogai, where he begs him to stop chasing the empty honor that has been his only goal for 3 long years. But all of that is done purely out of love for Zuko, out of a desire that he grow up to be a good man for his own sake. And that aspiration cannot be quenched, cannot be stamped out, though not for lack of trying on Zuko's part. It is his fault, after all, that his uncle winds up in prison, but even behind bars, Iroh is willing to impart his wisdom, which this time is less direct. He instructs Zuko to seek out the truth of his family history, leading to the prince discovering that he is the descendant of Avatar Roku, and ultimately to Zuko's decision to change sides in this war. This is an important lesson for all fathers watching, perhaps the most important. We can show our children the way. We can implore them to walk the straight and narrow. We can give them every reason and advantage available. But in the end, they have to choose for themselves. Should they stray, we must never give up on them, must never wallow in grief or anger, must pray for their return and strive with our whole strength to help them and find the way again. I was never angry with you. I was sad because I was afraid you had lost your way, but you found it again, and you did it by yourself. Methinks Iroh gives Zuko a bit too much credit and underplays his own role, but he still speaks the truth. Iroh had done all he could. The choice was Zuko's. This is the ultimate goal of a father. Raise children who will make such choices, who will reject vice for the sake of virtue, who will turn away from sin and find the path of righteousness. Easier said than done, obviously, but the beauty of stories like Avatar the Last Airbender is that they show us the traps into which we might fall, as well as how to avoid and escape such pitfalls. They show us the way, as we must do for our children. It's truly amazing how much one can learn from this television show that is allegedly made for kids. That's one of my channel's main themes, to be honest. Stories matter. They have an impact on us, whether we acknowledge it or not. To that end, I've decided to go a step deeper, which is why I've started a book club through my Patreon that will explore not only fiction, but also history and philosophy, always keeping in mind the desire to grow in virtue through whatever it is that we read. In our first month, July 2026, we'll be reading Crime and Punishment as our novel, paired with The Consolation of Philosophy, and some readings about monasticism in the Middle Ages. If you are watching this still in June, there is a sale going on for Patreon memberships, 40% off if you use the code BOOKCLUB40 at checkout. The book club, which is for all paid tiers, will be run through my Discord, and members of the Warrior tier and above also get to join a voice chat at the end of every month. Go to patreon.com/MasterSamwise to join. I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching. God bless, and have a good one.